And now here white can continue by capturing on d5. This is because after e takes d5, now white can continue by pushing e4, challenging this d5 pawn, and obviously black cannot capture this e pawn, so that's why he goes for bishop to d6, attacking this knight but simply knight to f3. Okay, and after that black can develop his knight to c6, and if takes, knight takes d5, knight to c3, knight takes c3, b takes c3, and you can see both sides are doing great. But in the actual game, after the move a6, here Nodirbek goes for queen to b3, creating more pressure over this d5 pawn. But guys, that's an inaccuracy because you can see this knight and this dark square bishop are still in their original squares. So first priority of white will be to develop them before moving the queen. And now Esipenko goes for bishop to d6, simply attacking this knight. And as I said, for white, it's important to develop this knight on c3 so that he can keep an eye over this d5 pawn. And if black suppose pushed d4 trying to attack this knight, simply knight to d5. And if knight takes d5, you can see black will successfully place his queen to d5. And in the next move, white can bring his knight to c4, which will target this bishop. But in the actual game, after this move, here Nodirbek takes on d5, capturing this free pawn on d5. But why this move is a mistake? And guys, that's a mistake because after knight takes d5, and as I said, white is threatening to place knight to c4, which targets this bishop, and basically that's not a minor threat. It can create some big issue to the black position. Okay, so let's suppose if black goes for rook to d8, trying to defend this bishop, knight to c4, white will move according to his plan, simply bishop to e7, targeting this queen, but queen to e5. And guys, that's a really good move. Here white is attacking, where white is asking for a queen exchange, and black is now forced to exchange the queens because you can see there is no good square left for this queen because of this bishop on e7, which is also targeted by this queen. So the only square left for this queen is d7. But if this happens, now comes knight to b6, attacking this queen and this rook, and yup, that's all. So that's why after the move queen takes d5, here after analyzing all the moves, here Esipenko finds a brilliant move, b5. He sacrificed his rook, and obviously here black cannot capture on a8. But why? Let's suppose if white goes for queen takes a8, and as you can see, now white is in black territory. So now comes the move bishop to b7, and you can see the white queen gets jailed. So here the only square left for this queen is simply a7, but now comes knight to c6, attacking this queen. And if knight takes c6, queen takes c6, and suddenly you can see black is now threatening mate in 1. So to stop this, the best move is e4, but after that simply bishop to b8, and you can see this queen is trapped. Okay, so let's go back to our move, which is this move. And guys, let me tell you another thing. Also, this move d5 has another purpose. Basically, this move also takes control over the c4 square so that this knight cannot enter. And black is also preparing for bishop to b7 so that he can target this queen. And again, white must consider developing this knight, but instead he goes for e4. And now c4 by Esipenko, and for white, it's better to just push this pawn further, but he goes for bishop to e3. And the problem with that move is now comes knight to c5, creating more pressure over this d3 pawn. And you can see in the next move, black is preparing for bishop to c5, and this is completely winning for black. And to avoid this, here white can go for the move b4, but instead he goes for And guys, now for white, it's better to just bring this queen back to h3 so that he can cover this check. But he made a mistake by pushing g4. Yes, he creates this g3 square for this king, but in this position, Esipenko shocks everyone by sacrificing his knight on c1. And his idea is simple. He wants to open this d file for this rook, and here Nodirbek simply takes on c1, which is obviously a mistake. Instead, he must consider the move queen to c2, because now Esipenko simply sacrificed his rook by rook takes d2 check. And obviously white cannot capture this rook due to the threat of queen to e2 check, and wherever this king goes, queen takes g2 will be checkmate supported by this bishop. So that's why the final move by that's why he goes for king to g3, queen to e2. And in this position, Nodirbek Yakubboev resigned, because let's suppose if this game continues like h5, creating an escaping square for this king, now comes bishop takes f3, if rook to h1 so that he can stop this mate, but simply queen to f2 check, king to h3, bishop to g2 check, king to h2, and finally bishop to f1 checkmate. What an amazing game by Esipenko. This is your host Bison signing off. Bye bye.